understanding the importance of the planning cycle. And just as was mentioned, I am from Gothenburg. My name is Amanda Colliander, and I work at Volvo Cars during my daytime hours. Okay, so, and already here we come into Agile. So I worked my entire career within IT. So I was introduced to Agile very early on. And there are so many takes on how to become Agile. But I thought we would go back to the Agile Manifesto from 2001. And there are more to it than this, of course, but this is sort of the one-pager that you can use. And it says that we value certain things over others. So both can be important, but here the green things to the left, they are what we prioritize when we need to prioritize, when we need to choose. So for instance, interacting with individuals is prioritized over processes and tools. Working software, or sometimes we nowadays say products here, is valued more than documentation, and collaboration with customers over negotiating contracts, and responsiveness to change over following a plan. And these have very much guided me throughout anything that I do. So I'm showing this because it's important to how I interpreted and I started to use the Kata that we are, of course, here to talk about. And when I started with the Kata, I really thought that it resonated with what was to the left, the green parts, and especially the experimentation part of Kata. I really saw that this is spot on what we're trying to do. I really like that instead of making a long list of things that we should get done, sometimes called waterfall planning or whatever, you sort of experiment and you learn from it. And even failing, if you can call it failing, I mean, even if what you expected does not happen, you can learn from that and you can have a really constructive coaching session. And if you're using the Kata, of course, you're familiar with this, but I didn't see it before in my other life, so to say. And this really made a big difference to how I led teams and people. So I could be structured and I could be challenging while still being respectful and coaching. And I really, really like that. So I thought then, and I think now, that the Kata is a great tool and it gives me a lot of value. And it's also over the years made me instinctively thinks like, okay, what am I experimenting? What am I expecting? And then so on. Not always, but sometimes. But the thing was that looking at the Agile values, as I said, thought they very much resonated with the execution phase, whereas the planning phase, I did not think was that sort of aligned with the green part. So I thought that I shouldn't spend too much time here. This is not something that I'm going to prioritize. And in hindsight, now I can see that it was probably a few things that made me also think like this. Maybe it was actually what the reason for it, but I also think that I was impatient. So the execution phase was more fun. And I also think that I didn't really understand how I should do the planning phase properly. It's not that I didn't do it, it's just that I didn't really do it properly. And what happened when we skipped ahead to the execution phase, so we did understand the challenge, we did grasp the current condition, and we did the target condition. It was just that we didn't explore it thoroughly. It was fairly fluffy, and then we went into the execution phase. And what happened was that we started off very good, and we made a lot of experiments, and we learned a lot. But since it wasn't very sort of concrete or easy, and to see exactly what is hindering us from reaching a fluffy challenge or a fluffy target condition, and the current condition was also a bit fluffy, it dwindled. It got harder and harder to figure out what should our next experiment be. So I thought that there is some sort of feeling here. Maybe it's my ability to ask profound questions. Maybe it's that the kata doesn't work too well outside of sort of a manufacturing process. And I also thought maybe we don't really have these repeating processes that we are talking about. So how can I use this? Maybe the kata is less effective for the reality that I am in. So that was where my mind was at. And when I talked to people in the kata community, they kept coming back to that I should spend more time on figuring out the current condition. And in hindsight, yeah, I think I should. But the thing was that when they sort of tried to give me concrete tips, this was what they gave me. So it was spaghetti diagrams and cycle times and operating patterns and equipment capacity and so on. And to me, that was just words. It didn't mean anything. And I had no idea how to translate that into my environment. And that also goes if I looked on YouTube and so on. It was very much about the experimentation phase, but I didn't get too many concrete tips on how to do the planning phase. So I continued to use the kata and I got some results, but as I said, it dwindled after a time. Then comes Kata Girl Geeks, and I joined earlier this year, so it's not a way long time ago. And this is a community for improving our kata and coaching abilities. And there are big meetings. And then when I joined those, I got to actually see coaching cycles in real time, which is super cool. And I understood quite a bit because I saw that the challenge was not about manufacturing. It was about actually improving the community. And this struck a chord with me. And I realized that there is something here, but I still had a very hard time to translate it into my reality. So then coming it a bit further into this community, I had the opportunity to join one of the learning groups. And this is where you can sign up as a learner, and then you're paired up with a coach, and the coach can get a second coach. And this is a very intense experience. So you pick your challenge, and you have a coaching cycle more or less every day, every weekday for 8 weeks. And I got the opportunity to have a very experienced coach who's here today, Tracy Defoe. And on the very first day of the very first week, of course, we started with the planning phase. And this is the board at the end of these 8 weeks. And I know you can't see everything, but I don't think that's the important thing. I just wanted you to have a visual image of what it was. So we started looking at the challenge that I had proposed, and I got coached to rephrase it to be less about the solution and more about the wanted stage. And the first week, all the weeks, but the first week also was very intense. And it's actually hard to recall exactly the steps that we took. But I started to understand things about the current condition and the target condition and the challenge to some extent. Like I started to do a run chart. And this was something that I kept updating all through the 8 weeks. And Tracy helped me to start using operating patterns, both for the target condition and for the current condition. So all of a sudden, I got help to translate all of these things that I'd known about, but I couldn't figure out how to use. And then there were other things like that we actually used the experimentation record. So the light yellow parts of it is actually planning phase experiments or sort of cycles that we did. So this meant that I started to use the current condition and the target condition more as it's intended, but also in a more structured way and in a more concrete way, meant that I could address different parts of the challenge. I could do a focused process, and I could start splitting it up, and I could have a much clearer view of what are my obstacles, which of course also made it much easier to start addressing them. And another learning was that Tracy explained to me that the coach's role is both to teach the improvement kata and to coach the learner on the subject. So I could just rely on my coach to show me the process, to show me all these things, to help me translate it into my challenge, to my environment. And yeah, and it allowed me to achieve the challenge and not see this dwindling of the energy of the possibility. So where am I now then? Well, this is the picture that I would like to sort of symbolize where I am now. This is a journey that I'm still on, and I'll be starting a new learner group in January. But this first sort of 8 weeks has really shown me the difference that an experienced coach can have, and it showed me the power of the planning phase. And to some extent, it sort of opened this other part of the kata that is at least perhaps as important as the experimentation part that I've been using for a longer time then. So I no longer see that the planning phase goes against the values to the left of the Agile Manifesto. I rather see that they are actually very much aligned, and we need to understand where we want to go to and where we are and what could be our next step. And today I am even stronger that the entire planning phase and execution phase could help implement agile values, help the agile community with focusing on what we're trying to achieve rather than going through motions, which I think many agile frameworks are trying to do in order to teach us an agile mindset. So that was my story.